Hey everyone, it's Ivan, keepatcher.com, out here for another gun review, and today talking about this guy right here, which is the Perun X-16 by AEA Arms. We will go ahead and start with the what, because there's some kind of pretty interesting stuff going on. Big picture, you're looking at a kind of a hybrid between a direct impingement AR and a piston gun. So with that, you get some, well, actually kind of best of both worlds with kind of respect to reliability as far as direct impingement, and then also pretty clean running with respect to a piston gun, which is pretty cool. Not to mention pretty smooth recoil. So they've done some pretty cool stuff. And in addition to that, something else that's pretty neat is it's set up for right or left-handed shooters, in that you have a non-reciprocating charging handle. And since I've been on my journey to the other strong side, shooting left-handed, being right-hand dominant and right-eye dominant, I basically set this thing up for shooting as a left-handed shooter. So you can move the charging handle from one side to the other, move it back, and as you fire, again, non-reciprocating, until you need to actually manipulate the bolt, and then we can do that, which is pretty cool, honestly. There is massive parts compatibility with this gun and your standard ARs, to include largely lowers as well as all those internal parts, same with barrels, gas blocks, and then you start to get into different stuff with respect to the actual gas tube length, and then of course you still have your standard bolt, but this mechanism back here, which we'll show you in a minute. The other thing is this actually ships with this. It's a polymer lower, which is nice because it's lightweight, can use everything else. This though is cut dimensionally right here because you have no need for receiver extension. You don't need to thread a buffer tube on there. And inside here, awesome, basically drop-in match trigger, ambi controls, all of that. One thing, which I'm not sure if it got changed in the production model, but personally, I like this all the way around, protected on three sides. It's not here. Opens the potential of accidentally pressing this. Has it happened to me on this gun? No. Is it a thing? Can it happen? Yeah, it can. Basically not having that guard and having this sit a little bit lower, but just something I had ran into, or potential to. To take this apart, once you take that lower receiver off, you basically slide this back section off, then we can get into the internals. Break this loose, comes out here, and here's kind of the magic. So the way this works, round, it's fired. This is a kind of standard bolt here. You can disassemble all that stuff there, but bolt, firing pin, all that. Fire round comes down, gas goes through, or through that port into your gas block. Comes back through the gas tube, and there's a little block back here which basically channels that gas from your gas tube into the face of this piston. It then compresses on this spring and guy rod and goes through its whole cycle of operation, coming back forward, strip another round, and fire. So you have relatively small mass moving pretty much right here, which is what is giving you that nice smooth recoil impulse. This gun right here is a pre-production version. Not that a ton has changed, but a little bit has changed. And some of the cool things that this actually does is different caliber options. So this one chambered in 5.56, and they also have other versions, 300 blackout, 7.62 by 39, 6mm arc, and I think 6.8 SPC, or I'm sorry, 6.5 Grendel rather, which is cool, like different options. And this one right here has, I believe, 11.5-inch barrel. They make various different barrel lengths, and they actually have the Perun X-17, which is basically a 308 platform, 6.5 Creedmoor 308, and then I think Perun X-9, 9mm PCC. Personally, I like this, the most flexibility, and 5.56, pretty solid round, pretty useful for most applications. That said, it has a kind of two-part rail system. So as you can see, compared to like a traditional gun. Rail is most certainly higher. That cuts both ways. On the one hand, depending on the style of shooting you do, definitely lends itself to more of a heads up shooting, which is good, especially if you're going to shoot nods, gas mask, anything like that, or if you just don't like craning your neck down, right? I will say, like, there is no free lunch. So with that, your offset with pretty much any optic is going to be higher than it would otherwise be with like a traditional direct impingement like AR. So it is a thing, but definitely works. Also, you have two different levels here. You can mount stuff anywhere if you want to put lights, lasers, any of that stuff. And then of course, M-lock around the whole thing too. These have these backup iron sights. Again, same thing, elevated from traditional height. So there will be a different offset there than you would traditionally have. Totally doable. And the other thing I will say is I like shooting suppressed. So you can get this. They offer a kind of 360 degree muzzle brake. I opted to take that off because, again, I like shooting suppressed. And actually, this thing, the original handguard on this, which you can swap out, there's a lot of different configurations, 4 different barrel lengths. The original one came out a little bit further, and I'm like, that does not work for me, because I'd put this muzzle device on, which is their B&T, for their Mars can, and which I think I have. And it basically, there was a little bit of interference. So quick hacksaw job, cleaned it up, ended up painting it too. And that allowed me to throw this guy on here. So you can get it started. So now I have plenty of clearance. But this thing, shooting suppressed, is amazing, in part because of the adjustable gas system. Because up front here, this is using direct impingement, you get to take advantage of some of the cool things on the market. And so what they've done is they actually use a Superlative Arms adjustable gas block. So you can adjust it through, limiting the gas coming back, and then you can also turn it all the way out to where you have the bleed off function. And quick note with that, it's a compromise. So you're like, hey, I want a gun that shoots really nice, unsuppressed, and I want it to shoot suppressed really nice too. We kind of get to pick one of those, because if it's going to cycle and run nicely suppressed, you probably don't have enough gas in the system to actually cycle it shooting unsuppressed. Conversely, if this thing is shooting really nice, unsuppressed, you throw a can on there, you create some back pressure, now it's overgassed versus shooting really nice unsuppressed. Yeah, so compromise, right? And I will say the only issues I've actually ran into were self-induced, I guess we'll say, with respect to gas settings. So I actually took this down, shot it in a I guess it was urban rifle down at Thunder Ranch, carbine course. It was awesome. It was fun. I did have to adjust the gas setting because they shoot frangible center fire ammo, I believe, which works great, but comparatively, if you're shooting like M855 or something along those lines, definitely underpowered. So had to adjust the gas setting some, and it worked great. The only malfunctions I think I was running into were self-induced when we were working malfunctions. I will say, this being pre-production prototype, the stock it came with, I don't even remember the manufacturer of it, but it basically self-destructed. I think part of it had to do, we were basically switching shoulders, shooting on barricade, and somehow it got tied up, pin came out, and the whole thing like fell apart. So that happened. Not on these guys. They consequently took that feedback and were like, definitely not shipping with that stock. So to that end, real quick, it'll either ship with the ACR like SCAR stock, which is pretty cool, or it'll ship with this piece, which is basically skeletonized, and it'll take any like mil-spec carbine stock. It essentially is a skeletonized like buffer tube, and it hinges because, again, we are a piston gun. Don't have to have that buffer tube, which is cool. If you're like, I need to be able to shoot with this thing collapsed, I don't know why you would do that, but it's an option. But this actually allows you to put any stock you want on here. So by way of example, Magpul CTR stock, which for me, I found to probably kind of be the best. This, because it's not a buffer tube, there's, you can maybe hear it and see it, there's a little bit of play in there because you don't have the entire circumference of the buffer tube for this to get up against. So with the CTR stock, you can collapse that and it gets tighter, which is a good thing. Probably that ACR stock, probably the best thing going, but Picatinny back end, so you can honestly put whatever you want back there, to include if you have a pistol with a brace. And forgot where I was going. Superlative arms, adjustable gas block. So ended up getting back from Thunder Ranch, shooting that course down there, really fun. Started shooting it some more, and I was running into some weird malfunctions where the round would be in here. And so twofold, again, pre-production prototype. So on the one hand, I now had too much gas coming into the system, so it was violently throwing this thing and it was throwing it back in. The other part of that was the deflector. So this is the follow-on production deflector, which even if you have this thing way overgassed, it'll still deflect at an angle where it'll actually kick the brass out and not back into it. So that happened, it was addressed, and then further addressed by me actually adjusting the gas system to where it needed to be, to where now, suppressed, this thing is amazing. If I take the can off, will it function? No, it will not. Do I care? No. I've set it up and optimized it to shoot suppressed because I don't ever shoot this unsuppressed. That's what I have it set up for. If you're like, hey, I wanted to do both things, cool. No matter this or any other gun, recognize it will be a compromise. So I have it set up strictly to shoot suppressed, and really, really smooth recoil impulse with that DI coming back, direct impingement, and then moving that small, relatively light mass piston system back in the back end. Some of you are asking, Ivan, is it a laser beam? Can you just keyhole shot after shot with this thing? To which I would respond, can you keyhole shot after shot with any gun? Some of you, I'm sure, can. Some of you probably looks like a shotgun, and your paradigm is shooting at indoor range at 25 yards, so quarter MOA gun probably doesn't matter. But I ended up taking this thing out with a number of different loads and doing my best, magnified optic on here, and trying to get some good groups. Here's what I ended up getting. Starting out with some Winchester white box. First group coming in at 1.9 MOA. And my second group coming in at 2.16 MOA. Then switching over to some Federal 55 grain full metal jacket. First group coming in at 3.12 MOA. And my second group coming in at 2.99 MOA. Then trying some PPU M855 62 grain green tip. First group coming in at 1.86 MOA. And my second group opening up to 3.97 MOA. Probably a flyer on there, but it's what I got. Next, switching some Hornady 75 grain match. First group coming in at 1.11 MOA. My second group with that Hornady match coming in at 1.45 MOA. And lastly, using some Frontier 68 grain boat tail hollow point match. First group coming in with a flyer at 1.69 MOA. Without that flyer coming in at 0.88 MOA. And then my last group with that Frontier with a giant flyer coming in at 2.4 MOA, and without that called flyer coming in at 0.91 MOA. That's usually what ends up happening. I'll shoot through some different range ammo, and then I'll get some match ammo, and I'll be like, this will probably group pretty good. Be like, okay, I've been focus. And then I'll end up pulling rounds. But that's what I got out there that day with this gun. Can someone else do better with that ammo? I'm sure someone can. Like, there's some really good shooters out there. Like, am I a half MOA shooter? Not every day. Most certainly not. And is this capable of half MOA? Yeah, probably with the right ammo and the right person behind it. But that's what I got out there that day. Big picture, what are my thoughts? Honestly, I think it's a pretty cool gun, and I appreciate the approach they took with it as far as direct impingement combined with a piston gun. So my experience with piston ARs, not a huge fan. Like, shot 4.16s and stuff like that. Usually pretty violent, not a fun recoil impulse. For a while we issued LWRCs. Again, you have like this weird mass and reciprocating mass up front, which just creates like a weird recoil impulse. Some people probably love it, not so much for me. And yeah, I don't know. When you're trying to add things to an existing platform or change it, sometimes you go in the wrong direction. This, I think, is actually kind of a cool step in a different direction. Like being able to have a non-reciprocating charging handle that is forward mounted, so you're not coming back here. I think there's something to be said for that. And yeah, like pretty clean. I think I cleaned this thing once, maybe right before I went down to Thunder Ranch. Haven't cleaned it since. Been out there on a lot of range days, and it just continues to run. It's pretty cool. Yeah, there's not a ton of innovation in small arms, especially with respect to just kind of like how guns operate. There's like pistons and their direct impingement. And I think this was a pretty cool step in a different direction. I will say, like, heat-wise, it does not get crazy screaming hot like a traditional piston AR does, because you don't have everything coming out and happening like right here. You have some gas going back like a DI, and it's just moving that mass. And depending on how you have this set up, I have it set up for bleed off, so it's bleeding off the rest of it. But I've been actually really pleased with this thing overall. And as a quick aside, Perun, I believe, is in reference to kind of Eastern Europe's version of like Thor or Tyr, kind of God of War. And yeah, if you're interested in one, Perun X-16, you can actually get them through AEA Arms. Right now, I think as of filming this, they're just shipping 5.56. They will be shipping those other calibers in the future, but overall pretty cool. And again, coming down to use case. A lot of people really like AR controls because they're really well thought out. And it's like, oh, a non-reciprocating charging handle that is easier to reach than coming back here. Also a bonus. And you're like, oh, hey, this is going to be a bag gun. I want something I can pull out and immediately employ without having to fold a stock out because a buffer tube or something like that. Again, checks that box. And if you like shooting suppressed, definitely shoot smooth. Price-wise, you're looking at, I want to say around $2,100, depending on model, but yeah, overall, definitely a pretty cool gun. And lastly, if you appreciate my content and want to support it, greatly appreciate it. Whether it's liking and sharing videos or going over to kitbadger.com, picking up KBAT target pads, stickers, patches, things like that, or shirts through Teespring. All those things help me go out and create content for you. And if you want to support me and maybe you have questions, Patreon. Little as $1 a month, early access to videos, some exclusive stuff, and an active Discord. So if you have questions, happy to answer them over there. But As always, thanks for joining us at kitbadge.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.
He's gonna go get it, gotta run, set it, and then otherwise head right round my, everybody knows.